watches like she does. All right, so welcome to Creation Watch. I'm going to restart right here where I'm not talking about the drama in the community. And we're going to start right here. If you're watching this from Live from the Hive and you want to catch up on the LGBTQ issues and community drama, rewind. Just go back about 15-20 minutes and you'll get caught up. Oh goodness. No, well, drama is a topic, but we're mostly going to be talking about animals. You guys know I love talking about animals, right? And I love talking about the coelacanth and evolution and sharks. So I did part one. If you missed part one, I may release these just as no, I'll probably release them separate because I went on pretty long last time too. Anyway, see part one for my response to part one. He's going to recap it here, and I'll maybe recap my response when he does. A young biosphere. That's not a incorrect statement. The name of this video: strong evidence to support a young biosphere, because biospheres are the biosphere. It resets a lot throughout time. Depending on what you mean by a reset, we've definitely bottlenecked the species that exist on the planet quite a few times down to just a select group that was able to go on and repopulate. It would happen again if we had an extinction event. We could have an extinction event that kills everything but the tardigrades and the worms around the hydrothermal vents, and within probably 5 to 10 million years, we would have a full ocean biome again, through niche vacuums and whatnot. We'd have just the worms hiding down around the thermal vents, not even the tardigrades, right? Just the worms. Say maximum bombardment or nuclear winter hits the planet. Everything resets. Only thing that survived this extinction event are the creatures in the hydrothermal vents. We would have, I say we'd have within, even if all the nutrients besides what was in the hydrothermal vent were washed away, or burned up, they'd eventually find their way back they'd snow down into the atmosphere, or from the atmosphere. And yeah, we would have, as long as something didn't come vacuum off the atmosphere, us getting closer to the sun, for instance, or something of that nature that comes and sucks the atmosphere off the planet. But even then, we may see some sort of life persevere. Anyway, let's let him talk though. I've just talked enough about the title and in general, but it's been a shift. We've changed biospheres quite a bit.
Coelacanth still considered a living fossil.
Pretty. Let me know if he's loud enough. Can you guys hear him?
Welcome back to part 2 in the series. Since I'm going to be diving right in, I would ask that you go back and look at part 1 to begin with, otherwise you're not going to have any context for what is going on. You'll find a link for part 1 in the description. So,
same. Part 1. Not a link in the description though. You'll have to. Should be last week's show though. I haven't cut it yet because I wanted to see how long this one takes to see if I wanted to run them together or not. Let me see. Yesterday I found a butterfly in my garden path. It climbed into my hand, onto my shoulder to sun itself so it could get its wings working. Ooh, where are you where it's warm enough that butterflies are fluttering around? I want to be where you are. I'm in Illinois where it's freaking cold. Yeah, I think I can boost him a little bit. I'm just going to turn him all the way up. There we go.
The fourth solution seeking to explain evolutionary stasis in living fossils is to fall back on the philosophical underpinnings of evolution itself. In other words, since Darwinian evolution is true, and since 400 million years of time have passed, then organisms alive today cannot be closely related to those that lived 400 million years ago, even if they share a very close morphological relationship. And this is the hypothesis put forward in this paper by Cassane and Laurenti. In order to
So, to recap, what this is about is essentially saying that because something's morphologically the same, that means it's closely related. And he uses the coelacanth as an example. The coelacanth is a species. Well, there's two species, or two genera of coelacanth alive today, and there were a multitude in days gone by, up until the extinction that killed the dinosaurs. They were fairly common across multiple biomes around the world. Now the only ones that survived were the ones that lived in this very stable area of the deep water column right above the midnight zone, from a few hundred meters down to a few thousand meters down is kind of where they find their balance, and this biome's always existed as long as there's been water on Earth. This stable water column. I mean, there's rivers and stuff that run underwater. We did talk about that. When it comes to the ocean and oceanography, there's like Arctic rivers that run underneath warm oceans, and there's canyons and valleys and waterfalls and springs and rivers and lakes and ponds. There's toxic ponds, and in all sorts of different biomes down there. But one that's stable is, along with the midnight zone, which is really stable, is this midwater area right above the midnight zone. And these fish managed to carve out a niche there, similar to how sharks managed to carve out a niche in the upper area of the water column. Now, his argument is that because there hasn't been much morphological changes from modern into modern coelacanths and their ancient cousins, means that they are closely related because they have morphological similarities. I think he talks about dogs in this, but because they have morphological similarities. But, when it comes to living fossils, people like to talk about coelacanths and things like that, but sharks are living fossils. They're abundant living fossils. Beetles are living fossils. Beetles appeared in the you can go to Mazon Creek and find beetles, and like I said last time, that's like where the Tully monster lived. There were things that weren't vertebrate or invertebrate, but something else in between. It was a weird time, and there were beetles around way back then that look exactly like the beetles that we have now, morphologically. I shouldn't say exactly. They have some unique physical characteristics, I'm sure, but it does not mean that they aren't real closely related to all modern beetles or to certain clades of modern beetles. It just means that they're in a stable niche, and they've dominated that niche, and they were so good at dominating that niche that nothing else has yet evolved that can contend with them to thrive in that niche. Moving on.
To make their case, Cassane and Laurenti compare Latimeria with its closest known relative, Macropoma, which is supposedly 70 million years old. Based on the skeletal data, they argue that Latimeria shows substantial anatomical divergence so as to support their hypothesis that the two genera are in fact not closely related. If that is true for Latimeria and Macropoma,
that's because Scirtopterygians, these groups of fish, were quite diverse in days gone by. Again, just this one little niche, managed to make it through. Hold on, I'm going to switch which one of these this is on, because I got it in full screen right now. I might as well use it, I noticed it was cutting off the top of the fish here. I might as well switch it on over to this one. There we go. That way you can see his whole screen, because he puts a lot of work into these graphics, and I don't want you to miss it. This guy does do excellent visual work. This is a channel called Creation Unfolding, and most of their videos are evolution stuff. So I've really enjoyed responding to the first one, and I'm enjoying responding to this one. So I will probably continue to make response videos to this individual. And he seems fairly patient and does like to try to unwrap things. So I appreciate that, and it gives me something to get my teeth into.
Poema, then, it is all.
Did I say skeletal, or did he say skeletal? Which I don't remember me saying it. If I did, I want to know how I pronounced it. If it was cool, I'm gonna start saying it that way. But if it was something he said, it may be an Australian accent. I think he's Australian. He sounds Australian.
Also true for all ancient coelacanths. Diplocycetes included. Again, go back to part 1 if you are not following along. Let me.
So yeah, so those are. This one's 400 million years ago. That's how long they had these Sarcopterygian fish dominated that niche, and those were our ancestors were Sarcopterygian fish too, the ones that first crawled up on land. So that just shows how the variety of niches that these fish held up until that extinction event, and how devastating that extinction event was, because these fish survived the Great Dying, right? They survived the biggest extinction event. 90% of marine life died during that period, but they made it through, just like sharks, just like horseshoe crabs and starfish, and well, pretty much everything alive today had ancestors that made it through. That's why we're alive today. So you did have relatives. But yeah, as far as the metabolic characteristics of the organisms could have been very different. While we have for a lot of these things are fossil remains.
Let me show you why I disagree with their conclusions. Let's start with the postcranial anatomy. In other words, the skeleton from the neck backwards. As you can see from their own diagrams, Latimeria, relative to Macropoma, has a longer vertebral midsection, but a shorter postanal region. The humeral arch, which is found at the bottom of each vertebra, has thin spines that run downward. In Macropoma, you can see that these spines are longer than they are in Latimeria. In the skull, Cassane and Laurenti point out a number of variances, too many to discuss individually here, but you'll notice that in nearly all of them, the differences are minor and all.
So, I mean, I'm not saying these differences aren't minor, but is the differences between Sarcopterygian skulls, there are definitely some differences to be seen. As you look at this, we got this orange area. What is the orange area called? The premaxillary bone. Very, very different between these two groups. I'd say there's as much difference here as there is between like a orca skull and a bottlenose dolphin skull, at least. And those are definitely different species that, depending on where you draw your line, some would say were not closely related, right? They're not even, or they're in the same family, but yeah. Anyway, go on.
Almost always pertain to aspects of bone thickness, length, slight changes in shape, with minor changes in dentical ornamentation on.
That's what the field of science is. It's measuring bones.
the premaxillary bone as well. But notice that the variations here are minor. And this is really, really important because the authors are trying to convince us that Latimeria, when compared...
The differences between your goldfish's skull and a freaking oceanic sunfish are minor. They're all the same bones, they're just shaped different. And under natural forces, if you're stable in your ecology, those changes don't happen fast. They happen gradually in a stable ecology, only when there's an event or some kind of change in the environment. Then do you see like dramatic changes in morphological structure, right? But even then, you'll still see the same organs, and in this case, skeletal remains in the fossil record will still have the same bone structures or similar bone structures to their modern relatives or relatives of their descendants. Oh, hello, Beck. Good to see you, babe. Oh.
To other older coelacanths is so different that it cannot be called a living fossil. And yet other paleontologists disagree. Consider this quote from a paper published in 2006. Evidence of the minor evolutionary change observed in the coelacanth can be found in its skeleton. The skeleton of the extant coelacanth is almost identical to that of Macropoma. Emphasis is mine. As it turns out, all of the morphological differences that we see between Latimeria and Macropoma can theoretically exist in the same species, let alone the same genus or family. Consider the variation that we see in different dog breeds, all of which consist of a single species. For example, here are the skulls of an English Bulldog, a Great Dane, and a Chihuahua. Notice the incredible plasticity of form that exists just across these three breeds. Every bone in both the neurocranium and the face of each dog is different, sometimes varying greatly.
Selectively so, because in an unnatural environment, we can encourage features that are not only not beneficial to the species, but detrimental. We can actually select and breed for physiological features within the group that are detrimental to its health and to its that would be detrimental to its reproductive viability if we were not artificially selecting for it. It would not pass on its genes in the population. We see this when dogs go feral. The population will start to, once it gets enough diversity, will start to weed out these characteristics, and you won't see them passed on. The dogs will start to revert to a more standard canine skull, like what you see on the one at the back here. When left to the whims of nature and natural selection, it weeds out these characteristics. It's not viable in the actual ecology. They can't sustain these shapes and forms. Domestic dogs don't still fill the same niche when they go feral as their wild cousins. Over time, they probably could evolve to fill the large predator niche, though, and that would be interesting to see. We do see them dominating predator niches on certain island habitats and in areas where they live in isolation, where they've been introduced, them going back into this feral population. That is, a dingo is a good example of this. They are dogs that were domesticated, that were brought over with the ancestors of the indigenous folks from Australia when they arrived some 50,000 years ago and became naturalized in the environment. And they reverted right back to this same standard pack hunting canid form that's a pursuit predator, just like other dogs and dog species. The wolves, of course, which being the natural ancestors, but not just them. African wild dogs fill this niche, and dulls fill this niche as well as these large pursuit predators. Now, dogs will revert back to that because the pug form, as cute as we think it is, does not make a viable pursuit predator. Not even the boxer really makes a viable pursuit predator, because the bully breeds that we create are also non-viable in the wild environment. They may be more viable than the Chihuahua and the Bulldog, but they're still not going to be as efficient as this standard body formula, because they put to put it in gamer terms, they put too many skill points into combat and not enough into cardio, to be the best that they can, the best members of the pack, to be viable within the pack, to be able to keep up with the pack in a wild environment. Yeah, I'm not into pugs either. I think that what we've done to pugs is unhealthy. I do like Chihuahuas though, and I think Chihuahuas are naturalized though. I don't think pugs are naturalized. I don't think there's enough genetic diversity to maintain pugs. Have respiratory issues, and yeah, so they're not viable in a natural state. Let's see what he says about this though.
The diversity of form that we see in dog breeds hasn't escaped the notice of evolutionary researchers. In this paper,
Yeah, they call bully. So I just answer Clara here. They're called bully breeds. The ones that were bred, like Mollisers and bulldogs, pit bulls, mastiffs. Oh, mastiffs, bully breeds, not really. Bully breeds do have mastiff in them though. Terriers are generally where they fall. Staffordshire terriers. Yeah, they're built to be, they're selectively bred. They are created to be physically to be able to take down or to hunt, or initially what they were for was to hunt wolves and things like that. So that's where we get those, because they didn't have to be fast pursuit predators to be to walk with their humans and track the wolves down and then fight the wolves and overpower them, or outnumber them. That's what bully breeds were initially made for. Obviously that's been a long time in the making, slowly over time. Yeah, Matt Walsh freaking posted a thing about bully breeds the other day. I almost included it in my show, but I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to. But I like bully breeds myself. They can be sweethearts. They're cute and lovable. They're not called bullies because I don't think they're called bullies because they bully the other dogs, though. I think they're called bullies because the way they went out, they would go out. Well, I guess, that's actually a good assessment. Maybe you could think of it that way, but they charge in like an angry bull, I think is the origins of the bull and bulldog. But it comes from bulldog because they're a mix of bulldogs and terriers, and I think that there's some like mastiff in the bloodline at some point too. Mastiffs are actually pretty buff big dogs as well, that serve that same kind of function. They were and have that same sort of origin to them, is to take on large predators, and that's why they bred them with the loose skin.
published in 2010, the authors used the skull variation in dog breeds as a proxy for macroevolutionary thinking in higher taxonomic ranks. And they said this: our analysis showed that the variation of cranial shape in dogs is comparable to that across the entire order Carnivora, and that differences in skull shape between extreme dog breeds even exceed the maximal distances we found among the species of Carnivora.
Right. Well, dogs are within carnivore, and that goes to show how far we can deviate when we use artificial selection as opposed to natural selection. Like I was saying, we can breed for weird traits that would never evolve naturally, whereas carnivora survives for the most efficient traits to thrive in the ecosystem. And that's the same thing that I was talking about with the canines skulls reverting back to a natural state when left in the wild. So, case in point, right? And with dogs, yeah, we don't. The only reason why we don't say these are new species of dogs is because they are phenotypes that we're selecting for specifically, that would the phenotypes would not be sustained in the population without a natural intervention. That's why we're able to make them, and we're able to make them a lot faster than naturally would be expected.
This massive disparity among dogs has evolved in a few hundred to several thousand years, a very brief time span. Charles...
Oh, sweetie, and those skulls you were showing there, that's very recent. That's within the last 50 years that they've gotten that way. You look at pictures of a pug or any bully breed, any bulldog from longer ago than 50 years ago, they look like a completely different breed. They'll all have longer muzzles, less neonate traits. That's the second time I've talked about neotenine today. That's kind of funny. And they will have, I don't want to say make it sound like insulting. They'll have like bulgier eyes. And that's with all breeds because of selective breeding and the way that we create these. And they also, when you keep the genome that tight, you also pass on lots of defects and traits that should not be passed on in the population, but find their way. Like John Hudson's talking about here, they tend to, when you pure breed them, they tend to have they can be deaf. Cats too, when you pure breed them, it can be deaf. They can have vision problems. I had a white cat. His name was Cirrus, and he had one blue eye and one green eye. He was completely deaf. Poor thing. Problem, he was declawed when I got him. He was a rescue and he was already declawed when I got him, which is fortunate for him. But we had other cats in the house and he couldn't really defend himself, which I felt bad for when I adopted him. But the people I adopted him from had a lot more cats than we did, and he was not doing well there. So I adopted him, but he was really moody because he couldn't hear when you came up behind him. So if you surprised him, he would turn and bite you. If anybody or anything came up behind him and he didn't know who it was, whether it was friend or foe, he would turn and bite him because he was deaf. I wonder whatever happened to him though, because when I moved, I gave him to my friend Amanda, and then when me and my first wife split up, me and Amanda kind of drifted apart, so I don't know. Anyway, moving on.
Darwin observed similar degrees of morphological variation among various breeds of pigeons. He said this: in the skeletons of the several breeds, the development of the bone of the face in length and breadth and curvature differs enormously. The shape, as well as the breadth and length of the ramus of the lower jaw, varies in a highly remarkable manner. The number of the caudal and sacral vertebrae vary, as does the number of ribs, together with their relative breadth and the presence of processes. Altogether, at least a score of pigeons might be chosen, which, if shown to an ornithologist and he were told that they were wild birds, would certainly, I think, be ranked by him as well-defined species.
Right.
Interestingly, this
because we can alter the genes and create bottlenecks of certain traits artificially that would not be present in the wild. If those sorts of bottlenecks did take hold in a population naturally, it would be speciation. But since those phenotypes are not actually viable in a wild population, we cannot consider them true species. They're artificial species, if you want to call them anything. Because if left to their wild reproductive whims, they would quickly revert back to a more basal form and weed out the bottlenecked traits that were not viable. Pigeons are a good example of that. And pigeons are pretty plastic too. You know, the dodo is a pigeon. It was the biggest pigeon. Foster's rule is a crazy thing. It does wild things to birds when they get there and they're like, hey, there's no predators here. And they just kind of thrive. But yeah, I keep pausing. I'm never going to get through this.
Single species of pigeon not only displays, as Darwin puts it, enormous differences in the shape and size of individual bones, it also exhibits varying numbers of ribs as well as caudal and sacral vertebrae. Yes, dogs and pigeons have had their genomes manipulated by human selection pressures, which obviously differ dramatically from those pressures associated with natural selection. But in both dogs and pigeons, these dramatic changes occurred in just a few thousand years, and according to Drake and Klingenberg, in dogs in only just a couple of hundred years.
Right.
These two coelacanth genera, although not experiencing powerful selection pressures from humans, have, however, experienced 70 million years of supposed mutations and natural selection in an ever-changing...
He keeps showing the shark and doesn't explain why the shark is not the animal he's talking about too, because the shark should be under these same criteria, right? The shark is also a living fossil, also has forms today that are almost identical to the prehistoric forms, even to the Paleozoic forms. So why not focus on them instead of the coelacanth? It's because the coelacanth came back, allegedly, because the coelacanth there weren't thought to be any of these types of fish, these type of Sciuropterygian fish alive still, and then we found some that were living in this mid-water column that I was talking about earlier, and it was fantastic. But sharks were there too. Sharks, same time. Sharks actually older than the Sarcopterygian fish, as far as I know. Sharks are something like 440 million years old, and Sciuropterygians are some more like 400. I don't have my timetables or anything up right now, so that was totally pulled from my rusty memory. So.
Changing and dangerous environment. In light of these observations, the anatomical comparisons of Macropoma and Latimeria put forward by Cassane and Laurenti actually serve to show that these two taxa are surprisingly similar, especially when we're told that they've supposedly been evolving for 70 million years. Cassane and Laurenti also extend their hypothesis all the way back to the pectoral fin of a supposedly 390 million year old Devonian coelacanth. To view my response to their interpretation, you'll find a link in the description that will take you to my article that fully describes that interpretation. After all, there's only so much I can fit in it.
I think I've pretty well crushed your interpretation in these two episodes. Correct me if anybody doesn't think I've dealt with everything he's claiming here. let me know if there's anything I missed.
10-minute video. But let me give you the heads up here. The fin of this supposedly 390 million year old Devonian coelacanth, although showing a greater degree of morphological disparity to that of Latimeria, well, it's still clearly a coelacanth fin. And this is important when we are told that the first dinosaur
Yeah, a shark fin is still a shark fin. A seashell is still a seashell. I don't know what to tell you, bud.
dinosaurs evolved from a small group of reptilian ancestors that then flourished and diversified into very unique groups such as the sauropods, theropods, ceratopsians, stegosaurs, ankylosaurs, hadrosaurs, and more, and then went extinct. And all of this, we are told, occurred in less than half the time that the coelacanths prowled Earth's oceans, while also remaining virtually unchanged. In fact,
They weren't the only ones remaining unchanged, though. There were, so this little guy, this reptile dude at the beginning here, Archosaura morpha, whatever it is, it's like a basal. So it also had another lineage that split off from it, Crocodilomorpha, and they, while they did go and try to tackle some of these dinosaur niches early on, they really found a good footing in this amphibious environment, where they were able to move from land to water efficiently and be proficient in both biomes, especially in like a shallow water biome. And they have maintained that niche since relatively unchanged since the same time with these dinosaurs started to diversify. Because after, see, this Triassic period is where this start. This was like after what they called the Great Dying. So this dude right here, he crawled out of the Great Dying, and there were all these open niches for all these large organisms because there was an abundance of resources with no large organisms to consume them and to break them down and to return them to the environment, and keep the great circle going. So they diversified into those roles. The Crocodilomorpha, they also competed for these roles. They pushed, and in the Jurassic, right after when they were on top of their game for a while. It was the metabolism of the other Archosauromorphs that allowed them to dominate the Crocodilomorpha and keep Crocodilomorpha, so that the only niche that they were able to maintain consistently and unchanged was this semi-aquatic niche. Now, they've been unchanged since then, while the dinosaurs went on to diversify and spread. But yeah, there were other groups as well that contended in this early biome, other groups of archosaurs, and some of them were more successful than others. Another one that was successful early on was the pterosaurs, right? The pterosaurs, and they thrived like the Crocodilomorpha and competed with avian dinosaurs throughout the Jurassic for this small flying niche. But there were other ones, that pterosaurs, that had already moved into or started to move into a gigantic soaring niche. Aaron was talking about that in that clip I just showed. And they were the ones that were able to survive unchanged because the dinosaurs started to evolve into the direction of filling replacing them in the small flying niche. So the large pterosaurs would have been, at the time of the Cretaceous, would have been considered living fossils before the KT extinction event, because they were holdover from previous biomes that had since changed, and now birds filled the niche that the rest of the pterosaurs filled, in these this one group nested within them managed to hold on and hang on to this giant soarer niche.
That doesn't get any easier to swallow when we consider the additional 200 million years of coelacanth existence that transpired before the dinosaurs even came on the scene. And
see, that's just a personal incredulity is what we're talking about right here. Again, stable water column that has existed since the last time I would say that this niche didn't exist was when when we had snowball Earth. So back from the cryogenian, maybe the early Ediacaran. I would say at least this biome has existed since at least the early Ediacaran. I'm going to leave it there, and has been stable, and the organisms that are able to thrive in it have been fairly stable as well.
And the 70 million years of existence that passed after the dinosaurs went extinct. To find out how to put all of this together into a cogent creationist apologetic, join me in part 3, where I'll bring this series to its conclusion. So that's all from me, Ken Colson, here at Creation Unfolding. So if you were in any way blessed by this video, then please go ahead and hit that like.
All right, you can hit my like button too. Please hit the like button if you're still out there in the hive, peeps. Please remember to subscribe if you're not subscribed. If you're a new subscriber, welcome to the hive. Maybe consider signing up for the Patreon. As you can see, I have new patrons scrolling down below that I'd like to welcome to the hive as well. We had, let's see, I'll just go through them all. D. Parks, Regios, Cyrenus Edmonds, Greg Hartwick, Dragons in Genesis, Dr. Tapioca Weasel, that's one of our new ones. Welcome to the hive. Logan Fisher, another one of our new ones. Welcome to the hive. Kalasia, welcome. Welcome. Julie LaVoice. Math Pig, thank you for subscribing and being part of the hive. Junk Shop Library. We have Critical Cupcake, Kevin Chaos, and maybe you, if you want to sign up now. The link's down below. Tiers start as low as $1. I haven't been putting out too much custom content over the last few months. As everybody knows, I've been going through a move and some life-changing events that have kind of shook things up, but I will get back to producing more content. Also I'm trying to start doing more short stuff, like TikTok stuff and whatnot. Mostly I've been focusing on doing bug content, but if somebody wants to just break it down for me to do response videos, shorts, and help me figure out how to do it, I would love to do that and love to get some traction out there doing some response shorts. Of course, I tend to ramble, so that's why I haven't. Yeah, I tend to info dump and then it's not able to be cut down. Anyway, so that was part 2. Is part 3 out? No part 3 yet. So I imagine he's still working on it. It says his name was Ken Colson, right? And so yeah, when he comes out with part 3, we can pick up right where we left off if you guys want to. But that's gonna be it for Creation Watch.